we will destroy your assets. So I think Iran could actually be much tougher this time round. And I have no doubt that the United States will fail. But what I do think will probably happen if Trump takes this seriously, I think that we are heading for a global economic meltdown. And we're already seeing signs of economic instability. I know you cover this a lot on your show with economists. They're going to need to sell all of those assets just to continue to exist. Not going to be tolerated in the Persian Gulf anymore. Its armed forces just they won't have the ability to function here. Iran won't allow it. So they're still proxies of the United States.
Talk about what you believe Iran is planning when it comes to retaliation to this economic war. We don't really actually know what Trump is planning just yet. It hasn't been announced so specifically, but Iran is being very specific, saying U.S. oil assets and anything connected to them are on the table. What's your assessment of this?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure. We're at war, and there is no ceasefire. People should keep that in mind. There is no ceasefire between us and the United States or the Israeli regime or the countries that are hosting and assisting the United States in this war. So the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, the Omanis even, Jordan, all of these countries, they are hosting U.S. forces. Some of them are funding the U.S. forces in their countries, like for example, the Kuwaitis, the Saudis, the Qataris, and the Emiratis. They're paying for this occupation. So they're assisting the United States in waging war against Iran in multiple ways. And in fact, these countries have waged 3 wars against Iran, this broader coalition. In 1980, when Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, the United States encouraged him to do so. The United States and the West supported Saddam, and U.S. proxies in the region, these very same countries, they gave him hundreds of billions of dollars to kill Iranians. That was a war of aggression. Then last year, when the Americans and the Israelis carried out that so-called blitzkrieg attack, they pretended that they were negotiating with Iran, yet they were preparing for war. Back then, U.S. planes were refueling Israeli jets. Those planes were all flying from these countries. They're taking off from these countries and landing in these countries and using the jet fuel of these countries. And these countries were paying for all U.S. expenses in those bases. So these countries were in fact assisting the Israeli regime aggression. And of course, yes, radar installations were used from Turkey to Iraqi Kurdistan to the entire Persian Gulf region. And of course, Jordan is always central to U.S.-Israeli military and intelligence operations. So then we have this war, which we all know about because it's still ongoing. So at the moment, there's no ceasefire. These countries have waged 3 wars against Iran. And therefore, Iran can punish any of them whenever it wants. Iran can fire missiles right now at the U.S. or at the regimes that host U.S. bases. All of them are part of this war. It's really extraordinary how during the last 6 months, you see these regimes pretending as if they're victims. Say, why is Iran striking us? You see some of their, they're the people on the payroll, also Qatari payroll, Saudi payroll, Emirati payroll, online saying, why is Iran doing this injustice? So the missiles are fired from their territory. The aircraft fly over their airspace. The refueling planes are based on their territory, using their fuel for free, and then they have the audacity to complain and pretend that they have nothing to do with this. And instead of striking the Americans, Iran is striking them. Whereas Iran has destroyed U.S. bases across the region, but also it has punished them as well. In my opinion, and the opinion of most Iranians, the armed forces have been very, very lenient. They have been very kind to these countries. Otherwise, the expectation of many Iranians was to wreck these regimes after what they've done to Iran, not just in this war, but over the years. So Iran has the right to strike out now because we're at war. And the United States is carrying out siege warfare as we speak. So last night, the chair of the Supreme National Security Council, Dr. Mohsen Rezai, or Major General Mohsen Rezai, he also has a PhD in economics. He gave a long interview, a somewhat long interview, not that long, but I would advise your viewers to go and read it in full. And if someone has translated it or with AI, to watch it in full, because it's a very important interview. And I think journalists in the West and everyone should definitely see it, because this is he's made it clear what's going to happen. So tomorrow, Bessent is going to apparently go out and declare what's going to happen. And as you rightly pointed out, we don't know what the plan is. We have some ideas how this could be different. How, for example, they may have approached neighboring countries, Pakistan, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and the others, the regime in Azerbaijan, and others, and Turkey, to tell them to decrease cooperation with Iran. And it's quite possible that these countries will resist to a degree, and to a degree they may go along. Some may fully support them, and some may resist completely. For example, Russia and China, they are going to ignore the Americans. I would assume Afghanistan, the Taliban in Afghanistan, they will ignore the Americans. And by the way, during the past year since the 12-day war, but especially after this war, Iran has been developing land routes for trade to Central Asia, the North-South corridor to Russia, through Afghanistan, and Pakistan as well. So this war has had this benefit for Iran. A lot of the goods that used to come from China to the Iranians through the Persian Gulf, through, let's say, the Dubai, now they're coming in through Central Asia. I've spoken to people who've actually who are involved in this, and they've said that the things are evolving. It's going to take time, of course, to get where they need to get. But in any case, the Iranians, I would assume, they are preparing themselves for these threats that are being put out there by the United States. And what is the objective? The objective is to strangle Iranian citizens. It is to starve them. It's a starvation siege. And this just shows once again that the collective West, and again, when we say the collective West, because sometimes when I say the West or the collective West, I get people saying, we are opposed to this. Why do you say when I say the collective West or the West, I mean the political elites, those who are in charge. It doesn't mean the citizens. We know, in fact, in Iran, it's widely understood that a strong majority of Americans opposed the war from day one, and that majority is growing. So when I say the collective West, that's basically what I mean. The Iranians right now, they are waiting to see what the United States is going to do, and they're guessing that the United States is going to threaten countries or to encourage countries to cut off all ties with Iran. And as I said, some countries will ignore them, but other countries will probably want to play along. Iran said that this barbaric act of war, this attempt to starve Iranians, and I've seen some senator go on a Sunday morning show during the first siege 3-4 months ago, when it began, the siege where they blocked Iranian ports, which is ongoing as we speak. A senator went on U.S. TV and he was gloating about how the Iranians don't have food and how they're hungry, and it was disgusting. And it just shows how disgusting Western elites are. They're diplomats, they're politicians, they're whenever I drive by a Western embassy, I think that these people are just a bunch of criminals. But in any case, they represent criminal regimes, and so they're criminals. So the Iranians are going to play hardball. The Iranians say that if any country in the region, if any country helps the United States to strangle Iranian people, Iran will punish that country and punish it badly. And Iran will use military means. So let's say the countries in the Persian Gulf, in one way or another, they assist the United States. They won't be able to export a drop of oil. Not through the Strait of Hormuz, as you rightly pointed out, not through Fujairah, and not through the Red Sea. Nothing. It'll be over. And if they try to do so, they'll be badly punished. If planes are not allowed to travel to Iran, then their airports will be shut down. In other words, Iran is going to play hardball. This is war. The Americans, just like the 40 days of fighting where they tried to overthrow Iran, destroy Iran, this is war. So we will use we will defend ourselves. Basically, General Reza is saying by any means necessary, as the late Martyr Malcolm X would say. It's basically saying by any means necessary, we're going to react, because this is the most vicious and inhumane type of warfare that the United States is pursuing. And it's only pursuing this because everything else has failed. Siege warfare, blocking the sea, has failed. The military onslaught against Iran has failed. Not only did Iran survive, Iran defeated the combined force of the United States and the Israeli regime and its regional proxies. That's a big deal. It didn't survive. It defeated them. And it defeated them twice. And it defeated them at siege warfare. And it forced Trump to sign the MOU, personally sign it. And so now we're back to war. And Iran is not going to pull any punches. So what does that mean? It means that if Trump is serious about this policy, I do think it will cause collapse, but not in Iran. It will lead to the collapse of Kuwait, of the Emirates, of Qatar, of Bahrain, of Saudi Arabia, and the list could continue. I mean, if Baku decides to block the route between Iran and Russia, well, then Iran could easily take out Baku's oil facilities and prevent them from exporting any more oil to the Israeli regime through Turkey, because most of the Israeli regime's oil goes through Turkey, even at a time when there's saber rattling between the two.
Yeah.
Turkey is the main transporter of oil to Israel. So, and much of that oil goes through, most of that oil, if I'm not mistaken, goes through Baku, or is from Baku. So in any case, if any country participates in this, Iran, the General Reza says, we will punish that country. He says that we'll first speak with them, and then if they don't step aside, then we'll punish them. And he also said that so far we've refrained from destroying U.S. assets in the region, but that will come to an end. So you go after our economy, you go and try to strangle our people, we will destroy your assets. So I think Iran could actually be much tougher this time round than the 40-day war. And I have no doubt that the United States will fail. But what I do think will probably happen, if Trump takes this seriously, if he does not taco, as you say in the United States, I think that we are heading for a global economic meltdown. And we're already seeing signs of economic instability. I know you cover this a lot on your show with economists, but just very briefly, the situation has been worsening for many years now because of the endless wars, because of neoliberalism and all that. But now we see indications of an economy on the brink. The yen is in trouble. The bond market is in trouble. And then, Danny, something that I haven't seen discussed at all is the fact that the governments, the regimes in the Persian Gulf, they have huge amounts of money in the United States, in bonds and stocks, assets, in the bank, in their bank accounts. These governments are not making much money anymore. They're making very little money. And they're in deep trouble, especially because they consume a lot of wealth in order to sustain their lifestyles, in order to sustain their image, in order to, for Dubai to be Dubai, for Doha to be Doha, and so on. So they're going to need their money back. They're going to have to sell bonds and stocks and assets just to survive. But if this war continues, and I don't think the Americans will let them do it. I don't think the Americans will let them sell their bonds. I don't think these countries will ever see the bulk of their bonds ever again. But in any case, these countries will need huge amounts of money. And in the weeks and months ahead, it's going to get a lot worse, far worse than what it was before. And I don't think they can sustain themselves anymore. And they're going to start, and they're no longer sending, because when they would, under normal circumstances, they would sell their oil, they would sell their natural gas, they would sell their fertilizer, their helium, their sulfur, and so on, and aluminum. And then a lot of that wealth would go to purchase more bonds, or to purchase more stocks, or to invest in the United States. Trump was actually expecting them to invest trillions of dollars for his AI projects. That's not going to happen. That's come to an end. But the reverse will have to happen. And these countries, in order to survive, they're going to need to sell all of those assets just to continue to exist. I don't see the Americans allowing them to do that. But if they do, it's going to create a crisis and help create a crisis in the bond market. The Japanese don't want to be involved anymore. They need to protect their currency. The Chinese are already leaving. These countries are no longer contributing anything, and it's going to gradually, or not gradually, it will have to be reversed. This is a very bad situation for Trump, and I have no doubt that the Iranians have one eye on the midterm elections. And if things go downhill for the United States in the next 2.5 months, and based on what General Reza is saying is going to happen, it's definitely going to go downhill, then I think Trump will lose the midterms badly. He'll probably lose the Senate too if things continue like this. And then his priorities are going to have to change after November, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. Great points, Professor Marandi. And you mentioned countries that are going to be punished for collaborating with the United States. Even now, with the talks of a potential, and I think what some people are wondering is if the Trump administration will try to do some kind of quote unquote land blockade, aka try to get these Gulf states to cut off ties with Iran to the point where even transporting goods across the region will be very difficult for Iran. But even with this talk of Iran acting in its own self-interest and striking these countries if they do that, and U.S. oil assets along the way, you have Qatar here striking a deal with the United States on refueling tankers, which are the exact kind of tankers needed for the United States to conduct hostile operations, meaning Qatar is obviously one of those countries that is collaborating with the United States. And Iran has said, this was going around too from IRIB News, I'm sure you saw it, Professor Marandi, that Iran's military chief just toured a secret underground ballistic missile plant and declared that there's a major wartime production boom underway. Quality is higher, capabilities are greater, and volume is way up. In effect, Iran has the capabilities and the means to strike. So it isn't just talk, which makes me wonder, Professor Roddy, what would be exactly the aim of this starvation campaign? It's not like sanctions are new to Iran, but for the United States to try to escalate it in a more direct manner seems to be suicide. And the signs are all here in the United States and in the West. Gas prices are not coming down. Diesel fuel is way high. It's almost $6 a gallon for diesel fuel, even in the cheapest of areas. That's a crisis that's teetering. This could push it over the edge. Your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a desperate stab in the dark. It's a vicious stab in the dark directed at women and children. And it shouldn't surprise us because that's what they did to Syria. They destroyed Syria. They starved Syria through the Caesar Act to crush the population and basically prepare the ground for the establishment of an Al Qaeda regime, or Cuba, or Venezuela. And of course, Besson mentioned Cuba and Venezuela in his when he was speaking, I think on Friday. So the examples of these two countries, but Qatar and the others, they are extremely vulnerable. Remember, they have nothing but oil and gas. Nothing. Iran is virtually self-sufficient in its agriculture. If there's a good rain, then it's self-sufficient. If it's not a good rain, then they have to import substantial amounts of some goods. This year it's been pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. So Iran doesn't need to import a great deal. It's self-sufficient, and many people are working in the agricultural industry in Iran. Iran, because of the sanctions, has its own indigenous industrial base. It produces a lot of its own goods. If you go to any supermarket in Iran, almost everything is Iranian. There's very little that's from anywhere else, unless you go to this high-end supermarket in wealthy neighborhoods where some people have to have their foreign chocolates, or they have to have their their cornflakes or whatever it is that they like. But still, most of the goods there are Iranian too. Even in other neighborhoods, they have these things as well. But for the most part, in any case, these are Iranian products. So you go to shops, most things are produced in Iran. It doesn't mean that, and that's because of the sanctions to a large degree, and also because of the mentality of the revolutionaries to develop an indigenous industrial base and to have independence when it comes to agricultural products. That's also, the part of the revolutionary model. But there's no doubt that if the United States wages this war and it has an effect, that it will make life more difficult. But U.S. proxies, for example, in Qatar, which you mentioned, Qatar would collapse if Iran directed its wrath towards the regime. It has nothing. It only has gas. And if Iran destroys its gas facilities with a couple of dozen missiles, or let's say a couple of dozen missiles and a few dozen drones, then it's finished. It's back to square one. There's nothing left. And the same is true with all the other countries in the Persian Gulf region, every single one of them. They're just deserts with oil and gas. And so the Americans are putting them at risk. And they, of course, since they have no independence or sovereignty, no dignity or honor, they are obedient to the United States. They know that the Americans are dragging them through hell. They were fearful of the collapse of their regimes during the 40-day war. And I said this on your show on multiple occasions that if the United States and the Israeli regime strike Iran's critical infrastructure, Iran will destroy their critical infrastructure. And they knew that if that happened, they would be wiped out. Everyone would have to leave. And that's probably, almost definitely, the reason why the United States didn't ultimately move in that direction, because it would be the big loser. Because all of its allies in the region, when it's destroyed, that would create a global economic meltdown, and it would have devastating consequences for the U.S. economy. And what is happening now is similar to that, because Iran has said that it is going to deal with these countries militarily if they participate in this warfare against women and children. They will strike back militarily, and if the Americans want to strike at Iran, Iran will strike back at them. Iran is prepared for war. And you mentioned a very important word in when you were describing the clip. That was a plant. It wasn't a base. That was not a drone or missile base. And as I was saying from the beginning of the war, Iran has underground factories. It has R&D. It has factories for missiles and drones. It is producing missiles and drones far more swiftly than the Americans can produce missiles or anti-missile systems. And there's nothing that the United States can do about it, because these underground bases exist across the country, just like the underground missile bases and drone bases and command and control structures. There's nothing that the Americans can do about it. So every day that goes by, Iran is moving ahead of the United States militarily, because while the Americans are scratching their heads trying to figure out how to increase their air defense systems, the Iranians are churning out new missiles with better capabilities, especially since during the war, the Iranians learned a lot. And we saw the difference between True Promise 2 and 1, and then the difference between True Promise 3 and 2, and then 4 and 3. And then this 13-day war with the Americans started after tearing up the MOU, when Trump violated the MOU, and then ultimately tore up the whole thing. When he restarted the war, we saw that Iranian missiles and drones were even more devastating than during the 40 days of fighting. So the Iranians have been developing their military capabilities during this period, advancing swiftly. It's not going to end well for the United States. I don't like war. I don't like siege warfare. I don't want anyone to get hurt or killed. But if Besant is actually going to carry out some sinister siege warfare against Iran, I think that the global economic collapse will be very swift.
What do you make of, Professor Marandi, the reports? There are a few of them around this that are a bit contradictory, or maybe actually they align, where you have Mohammad Ghalibaf saying that there are a host of Gulf countries lining up with private messages to Iran saying they want an independent security framework with Iran without the United States' involvement. And then you also have reports that Iran may have been invited to this so-called Mecca security pact between Turkey, Pakistan, and who was the third one? Saudi Arabia. What is your thoughts on this? Or is there any facts to this? And if so, I mean, for Gulf states to be lining up to conduct an independent security arrangement with Iran would directly undermine these plans for the Gulf to be used as not just a military outpost, which has been destroyed by Iran, but an economic war outpost. Your thoughts on this?
Well, if these countries survive, ultimately that's what they're going to have to do, because the United States is not going to be tolerated in the Persian Gulf anymore. Its armed forces they won't have the ability to function here. Iran won't allow it. So they're still proxies of the United States. Remember, the United States put these families into power, the British and the Americans. They kept them in power. And these are countries where you cannot criticize the ruling family. In Qatar, you cannot criticize the leader, and it's the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And in the West, they like to call Iran a dictatorship. In Iran, you can say whatever you like. I remember before the war, all those hundreds of Persian media outlets funded in the West, hosted in the West, whether it's TV or online media, or whether it was Telegram channels, or whether it was all these thousands of many thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, Iranians, are employed in these many different forms of media outlets in the West, Persian language. So they were saying day and night that before the war, that the leaders in Iran, they fled, and Ayatollah Khamenei, the martyr, that he fled to, I don't know, Moscow or somewhere else, I don't know. I recall some people, the naive pro-Western liberals, were saying, yeah, so and so is he went to Moscow. I mean, they would say all sorts of nonsense. They continue to say all sorts of nonsense, although the liberal element in Iranian society, or the liberal class, let's say, the pro-Western liberal class, they've melted to a great extent after this war, because people have woken up to the reality of the West. I mean, it's not just Trump. The collective West supported his assault on our country. The collective West supported his siege warfare. No one condemned him for killing 168 kids, which was intentional, in the Minab school, or the killing those teenage girls who were playing volleyball in La Mer, or when he bombed the hospitals in this last battle, in this 13-day offensive. They bombed a children's cancer hospital in Ahvaz, or the Gandhi Hospital in Tehran. I mean, the crimes committed by the United States and the Israeli regime are just, you can go on forever. But if you go to Gaza, it makes this look small. No one in the West protests against it. No, you don't see parliamentarians in the West signing letters of condemnation. You don't see intellectuals in the West signing these letters of condemnation. Actually, I saw something in The Guardian when they were trying to condemn Iran. It shows how despicable and compromised some of these so-called intellectuals are. But in any case, and again, I've said this many times, and I've been saying it again. People should read about Iran, and again, I advise people to go and buy the book Going to Tehran, buy Alistair Crook's book Resistance, read about Iran, understand Iran, so that they could see through the propaganda. The people who wrote these books were effectively punished because of what they were saying, what they were writing. They were among the elites in their societies, and they were sidelined because of what they wrote, because they just, the elites would not tolerate them. But in any case, so these parliamentarians in Belgium, or in Holland, or in Norway, or none of them were condemning the United States. You didn't see newspapers condemning the United States. So people in Iran noticed that. Many of the liberals who used to get their political views, I don't want to say everyone, but some of them used to get their political views, from places like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and whatever. And then when they were under fire, when their country was being bombed, they saw the narrative. They'd watch satellite TV at home and see how these people were basically supporting the assault. They hated Trump, but they were supporting the assault. So the liberal class in Iran, the pro-Western liberal class, has melted away to a large degree. But in any case, the point is that in these countries are dictatorships, and they're authoritarian regimes controlled by families, and the West has installed them. They're not going to deviate, from the West. They will stick with the West. their kids go there, their families go there for vacation. They take the country's wealth. They have palaces in the West, expensive apartment buildings in your home city, where they go for vacation. And of course, many of them are compromised. We've seen in the Epstein files some names, uh, you know, from these regimes in the Persian Gulf. So while they would like to have some sort of security arrangement with Iran, at the moment they just don't have that courage. They will tell the Iranians privately, "Yeah, I mean, we're not happy with this, and we look at what the United States has done to us. They've wrecked our economies, and it's all for the sake of Israel, and they don't care about us." But they're still not going to do anything about it. As you pointed out, Qatar will continue to purchase weapons from the United States. Basically, these are bribes. These are to so that the Americans won't get rid of them, won't overthrow them. So they have to keep paying. They have to, what did these countries do with all those military capabilities that they purchased over the last few decades against Iran? They couldn't defend themselves. They can't defend themselves against Yemen. How can they defend themselves against Iran with all that money spent? Why? Because that money was spent for the kickbacks and to please the U.S. government, kickbacks both among Western elites and kickbacks among the princes and the elites over here. So, and with regards to the second point, so these countries, they can't tilt away. You mentioned, what else did you say? You mentioned the second point as well. Oh, the grouping, the Saudis and
the Mecca
Pakistan and Turkey. I've heard, I don't know personally, an MP from has said that Iran has received an invitation. But last night, the chair of the Supreme National Security Council, in that interview, which again, I advise people to go and read or watch, he said, we don't know what this is. We have to see what it is. But, it does the whole thing raises a lot of issues because Pakistan has its own priorities. Saudi Arabia has different priorities, and Turkey has its own priorities. And each of them are looking at this agreement from a different angle. This agreement was not signed during during the first weeks of the Gaza genocide. It's been 3 years, and now they're signing it. So it obviously has nothing to do with Gaza. It didn't happen when the Israeli regime was taking over southern Syria. So obviously it wasn't signed to protect Syria. It wasn't signed when the Israeli regime assaulted southern Lebanon and continues to do so. So it's not about Lebanon. It wasn't signed when the Americans and the Israelis assaulted Iran. So, but it was signed when after the Saudis bombed Yemen. And remember, Yemen was the only country alongside Iran, the only country that was supporting the Palestinians. They had survived a genocidal war where all these countries in the region were supporting Saudi Arabia and back then the Emirates against the people of Yemen. The collective West was supporting them from Australia to Canada. And they failed. But Yemen, despite all that, afterwards blocked the Red Sea to stop the genocide in Gaza. When everyone else was collaborating with Israel, when they were transporting oil or purchasing gas or doing trade, Yemen blocked the Red Sea and the Americans waged war against Yemen. So this was signed right after the Saudis bombed Yemen because the Saudis didn't want the blockade lifted because an Iranian passenger plane, a passenger plane with an ordinary crew of men and women, was about to land at Yemen's airport, Sana'a International Airport, and they bombed that airport. So the timing is, all of your viewers can interpret as they may, as they wish. But we'll have to see how things evolve, regardless of what the objectives are for Saudi Arabia. We'll have to see how the situation plays out in the weeks and months ahead. Right now, we have something much, much more important, and that is a new attempt to starve the Iranian people. And Iran will definitely protect its people, whether those countries, whether you know the Saudis assist the Americans or not, that will determine the fate of Saudi Arabia.